How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining me for another math lesson with Mr. Woodford. Today we will continue to work on Unit 2 and Math for Math 8. Today we'll be looking at Lesson 1.5. We'll be talking about equivalent fractions and possibly even cross multiplication if you guys remember that. But I want us to focus on something called the common factor that can also be a great way to create equivalent fractions. So if you're joining me on from our class today and you have the actual unit packet with you, awesome. Join us, turn to 1.5. If you're joining on Google Classroom, please also open up the assignment to look at it with us. All right. As custom for us to do throughout every lesson is you're given bell work. Take a moment to pause the video right now to see if you can complete this bell work. Okay. It says multiply and divide the fractions below. This is a good time to pause the video. All right, so I'm hoping that you had a chance to pause the video and to reflect and think about what you need to do to solve both of these problems. Now, I'm not going to give you all the step-by-step guide for them, but I will show you a quick snapshot of what you should have done. So for A, you should have done keep, change, flip, because this is dividing fractions. Whenever we divide fractions, we use keep, change, flip. And that's the only time we use keep, change, flip, when we divide fractions. Not when we multiply, not when we add, or not when we subtract. So what you should have got when you change this to 3/7 times 7/4, you should have got an awesome answer of 3/4. Okay? Remember, your goal is also to write them in simplest form. So do your best to write your answers in simplest form. For B, B is more of a straight shot. It's straight across, so numerator to numerator, denominator to denominator. And what you should have got is I apologize. My brain started thinking about the denominator before I should have. Right? You should have got, on the top, you should have got 2/30. Now, if you got 2/30, even though this may be correct because you multiply the right way, you want to write your answer in simplest form, which would be 1/15. Okay? If there's any questions about how to divide or how to multiply, please look back and watch lesson 1.4 or send me an actual a comment on Google Classroom. That way maybe I can work with you one-on-one to be able to better understand the concept. Let's scroll down and look at what we're talking about today. So when I think about equivalent fractions, I think about it, you know, right, pizza, right? We have 1/2 of a pizza, pie of pizza. We have 2/4 of a pie of pizza. And we have 4/8 of a pie of pizza. Now, if you and I both looked at these all look like they're the same amount of pizza, which they are. But the fractions are different. The amount of slices are different. And this is where equivalent fractions can look different the way the actual fraction looks, but equivalent in terms of how much is actually there. So I want to work with you today on how to create equivalent fractions and to do so in a rather easy way and not a complex way. Okay? Now, if I'm looking at model A, right, what I see here is it's asking me to create equivalent fractions by cross multiplication and common factor. Believe it or not, I'm actually going to not use cross multiplication here. I can show you it. But for the sake of us being successful in this lesson, I'm going to refer back to it later on in another lesson that we're going to use. But for today, I want to show you how to find the common factor and use the common factor to find the missing number. Okay? All right, so if I start by looking at here, I find that the number that we want a number that goes on top of 24, that's going to make it this fraction the same as 4/6. Okay? Now, let's, for the sake of it, right, I want to talk to you about how do we find this common factor? How do we find the common factor? The way we find the common factor is this, right? And I'm just going to write it here just so we can all know, because that's our goal. Our goal for this lesson is to first start off by finding that common factor. There's another name for this common factor, which we're going to talk about later on as well. But for now, let's just call it the common factor. We need to ask ourselves 6 multiplied by something gave us 24. Now, whatever that number is that's being multiplied by 6 that gives us 24, we need to multiply by that same number at the top to give us the new number that needs to go on, that's missing. Okay, so once again, our goal is to ask ourselves, okay, what number times 6 will give us 24? Now, you got to remember the inverse of multiplication, because I'm asking about multiplication. But if you remember, the inverse of multiplication is division. Instead of saying what multiplies to give me 24, you can say 24 divided by 6 is going to give me that number. So instead, I can say, okay, 24, which is what I know, right, divided by 6 is going to give me some number. What number is it going to be? 24 divided by 6, of course, you guys know this gives me 4. If I put in 4 there, you can also see how that makes sense. 6 times 4 does give me 24. 24 divided by 6 does give me 4. So if I add in and I put the same common factor up here, I would do 4 times 4 and I would get 16. So when I go to simplify this fraction, I see 16 over 24. Now, when I actually, I apologize about my terminology. When I go to multiply this, 4 times 4 gives me 16, 6 times 4 gives me 24. But we will not be simplifying fractions in this lesson. Do not. Because if you simplify the fraction, where's it going to bring you? Right back to the other fraction that we just did, right? So we don't want to do that, but rather we just want to create equivalent fractions. But Ms. Norford, how do I know I created equivalent fractions? This is where that terminology that I talked about a little while ago, cross multiplication, comes into play. Because if I'm really saying that 4 over 6 is the same thing as 16 over 24, when I go to cross multiply them, cross multiplication, I want to draw a nice picture for you. When I go to cross multiply and say, okay, 4 times 24 and 6 times 16, right? So when I do 4 times 24 and 16 times 6, these should be equal to each other. If they're not equal to each other, then no, they're not equivalent fractions, right? But when you do multiply these, you do get 96 is equal to 96, which tells you that you did it right. This is also another technique that we can use not only to check to make sure our answer is right, but also to find the missing number. But I would prefer when you use it, you would use it to check your answer rather than just trying to find your answer. So the way we can do this once again is we first find the common factor. We find what number is multiplying to get us from the first number in the denominator or the numerator, it can be either one, to get us to that new number that's on the opposite side of it, right? And we could do division to figure that out and say, okay, well, let me do the opposite, 24 divided by 6, or in this case, 6 divided by 1. And we'll find the common factor. Now, in this case here, I would have preferred you guys write the number 4 underneath that. Over here, for the common factor, I'm going to write the number 6 because that's what the common factor is, okay? Now I got the common factor, put it in. And I'm going to say, okay, well, 1 times 6 gives me 6. 2 times 6, because it's the common factor, gives me 12. So that's what I'm planning on doing today. And of course, I can always check my answer by saying, okay, well, what I'm really saying is 1/2 is equal to 6 over 12. When I cross multiply 1 times 12, is that the same thing as 6 times 2? And you'll say, yes, it is, because 12 is equal to 12. Okay. Do me a favor, please pause the video if you need to, rewind it, take a second to really try to internalize it. But your goal for today is simple. Find the common factor and use that to find that missing number. After you find the common factor, I want you to identify what the common factor is, identify the missing number, and please use cross multiplication to check your answer to make sure without a doubt it is correct. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. I hope this helped you. If you need help with any of the other videos or the prior lessons, please feel free to watch one of those as well. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.